Hello, this is Reasonably Effective Podcast brought to you by myself, Uncommon Fossil, and my partner, 10 Types.
Hello, everyone.
Uh, Thank you. And so, 10 Types, how has your Pokemon week been going?
It's been going pretty well. It's slowed down a little bit. There are some like new decks that I've been messing around with. I've been playing actually Urshifu and Inteleon a lot, which is with the Inteleon VMAX, Urshifu VMAX. It's a very fun deck.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I've been having like a solid time, like making videos. Nothing too crazy. Um, yeah, not too much. But how's your week been?
It's been a good week. Couple things. One, I've been playing the video game this week. This was the first time I think ever playing the video game, so I've enjoyed that. It's kind of got the story aspect to it that's actually kind of enjoyable, which obviously you don't
Story,
get
yeah, the
that.
story's not that good though.
Well, it brings something different than just the battling, right? Which in it, so it's different than the TCG. I like that as
Yeah.
an addition. The story obviously isn't overly captivating, and I guess now that I've gotten going, it seems like there's not much of a story, but we'll see what happens with that. So, um, but and then also been playing the TCG and spending a decent amount of time with some of the decks from EUIC, which was about a week ago from when we were recording this, and some of the top decks. The nice thing with EUIC, I thought, was there are a lot of diverse decks in terms of what did well, and so I've been trying out some of those decks, which has been fun for me this week. So this idea, I'll just take this a segue. Want to talk about how to choose a deck, different ways we go about it. So what I just said, I was looking at Limitless. That's the kind of the go-to place to see what's happening for IRL events and online events, and looking at when there's a big event like EUIC, take a look at Limitless and seeing what decks did well, what decks stayed top cut, what decks just performed strong. And I found for me at least three decks that I've enjoyed this week. One, there is a Lost Zone box that has a bit of a stall control aspect that was unusual, so I thought that was a real fun one to try out. There was a Mew deck. That one's not very exciting, but I just wanted to give it a try. It was Mew with four
Double
Path to the
turbo.
Peak.
Oh, for the path.
Four
Yeah.
Path to the Peak. It was a DTE, but four Path to the Peak, which like up in the past you wouldn't have never wanted that. And then a Miraidon Regieleki deck that I find it to be a very fun
This,
deck.
yeah, it's also a pretty basic deck.
It's a vanilla deck. It's a straightforward deck, but that suits my style, which is also another part of it, right? Everybody, I think, has their own style of what they prefer. Ideally, as a player, you want to be well-rounded to do everything, but you have certain decks that kind of fit more naturally with what you want to do. So I like Miraidon. It sets up turn one almost all the time, right? You get one Miraidon down, and your bench is almost guaranteed to be set up in a strong spot at the end of turn one, which isn't so it's a more consistent deck, at least on turn one, than most, which I like.
Yeah. And on in that tournament, I'm looking at the results here. The first place, the winning deck list, is a bit interesting. It's Arceus. On Limitless it says Arceus Duraludon. It's actually on Arceus Toolbox. It also has Alolan Vulpix
Hmm.
V-Star, which is kind of interesting. Honestly, I'd say it makes Arceus Duraludon just with the Duraludon aspect worse, but Duraludon's not even that strong right now because
Hmm.
there isn't as much special energy. It's still like a solid attacker, but now that you have
Yeah.
like the Alolan Vulpix covering the different weaknesses, that's kind of interesting. I haven't actually played
Hmm.
this. I'm gonna probably try that soon. It also runs for Lost City. I don't even know why that's like in the deck, but obviously it's a solid counter stadium and allows you to get rid of scary attackers, as there are a few of those. And then I don't know most. Oh, and then there's the control deck, which I think finished like 30 something. And it's pretty all right. It's kind of interesting. It's based around like Penny style stuff. Penny,
That's Sanders' deck, right?
yeah, and that has Penny on pull up. If you're watching a video, if you're not watching, if you're watching like or listening on some other platform, obviously you don't see this, but Penny. Oh, I need to go to the weird deck editor and figure this thing out. But it essentially like scoop of net, put one basic Pokemon and all cards attached it into your hand. This
Yep.
allows you to do various loops such as Mimikyu V loop, or Solana V loop. It's just a solid like card for its healing and its like switching and stuff. So it's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Honestly, on live ladder now, I see this deck like so much. It's kind of I mean, yeah, I see it. I see it quite often. It's kind of annoying. It's a pretty solid deck. It's pretty beatable as well if you know what you're doing. But it's kind of it's a cool deck. And there's definitely like diversity within the meta, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah. The results of EUAC we're encouraging for where the game's at now. Um, so anyway, so obviously grabbing decks from Limitless, from IRL, a good way to do it, and the deck lists are all
Yeah,
there
I
pretty
think we should
much.
we should introduce like the topic, which is
Oh, please
yeah
do.
is how to choose decks, right? And
Hmm.
obviously we both been talking about just ripping decks from tournaments, but there are obviously a lot of different ways to choose what deck you're playing.
Right, and different motivations, which I think we'll discuss too, like from decks that will win games a lot to decks that you just kind of like or kind of meme decks too. I think they all have their place depending on your mood and what you want to do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so obviously, so if you look at IRL tournaments, that's a place to look for strong decks for the most part, right? So one of the factors is winning, right? It's not fun to have a deck that just loses all the time. So there's definitely times to me you want to look for a strong deck. So here, this is one of the better places to do it. Another part of a limitless, which I think we'll provide a link for in the description for the video down
We'll
below.
see if I remember mine. But oh,
Yeah,
and
I
if
will
you're
try
listening
to
to it
also.
on the Spotify platform, it's you're talking about Play Limitless, right?
Well, I get confused, right? There's two parts to Limitless. Is that correct, or maybe even
Yeah,
more?
if you just search up Limitless TCG, you'll show up like the in-person events. You can check out on that website, and then it has a link to the online scene, which is also Play Limitless, play.limitlesstcg.com versus the other Limitless is just limitlesstcg.com. But Play Limitless, I think with like the online scene, honestly, the decks
Mhm.
there are very solid as well. Um, I mean, not all the decks, but it has access to all the decks. If you want to look at not as good decks, but or decks that didn't perform as well, but it has access to um, so many very strong decks as well.
Mhm.
Some people just dismiss online tournaments, but they're honestly much more important than in-person tournaments. Well, it's arguable, but there's much more data to be looked at, and the decks are
Right.
certainly the top decks are just as strong.
Yeah, and I honestly I think even competitive IRL players have to pay attention to the online scene now too, because the meta it just helps them understand the meta. And obviously, if you want to look through, you can obviously select what tournaments you want to pay attention to if you look at individual tournaments for the bigger tournaments. The nice thing with the online events, which is the Play.Limitless site, it's easier to search for the current format. Like you can click on decks when I'm in the online situation, and then it's all just Scarlet and Violet. I where
Yeah,
but I think it's a mix of things in the IRL scene because of the way rotation is and stuff. It's a little more confusing to get just the current format in IRL. So you hit the current. It's easy to search the decks, and also you have a great diversity though online because you get. As I'm looking here at the moment, there's 80.
no, I think you can search in regular limitless by like format, but it's a bit more there's just a smaller data set. It gets kind of confusing.
Mhm.
But also with the difference between in-person and online tournaments based on legality, I think is causes some weird issues. Also, you can't like Japanese tournaments they're essentially the same format, but for some reason Limitless doesn't group them together,
Yeah.
and it just becomes very like messy when you actually want to like look at a larger sample size. It's essentially impossible to do on regular Limitless. So that's why I think Play Limitless, the online website, is in my opinion, my go-to website.
Yeah, I mean, like it's for a big event, I might want to look at it like with EU, like an international. But generally, the play limitless with the online. And I'm looking at now. You have 83 decks as I'm looking at play that limitless now. Now, a lot of the decks at the bottom have only been played by one or a handful of people, and a lot of the win rates there are obviously very suspect. But if you look at the top decks with the high number of plays, you see the win rates. You're going to see a lot of very solid decks if that's what you want to focus on. But then you can also, what I like to do is sort by win rate, and then you get to see with the highest win rate at the top. Now, a lot of those are decks not played a lot, but it's fun to kind of consider would you want to do that? Like I'm seeing a Hisuian Gudra deck, which is it's an okay
Wait,
deck.
on Play Limitless?
I played out limitless. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
got a 62% win rate, which is tremendous. Played three times, not a lot, but each time it's a winning. They've won more than they lost, so that's pretty impressive. So
Also, you need
you
to be
know.
very careful here. That for some reason, Limitless doesn't always put tournaments in the right category. It says
Mhm.
they're not necessarily actually standard events.
Yeah.
Like for example, I want to say Tatsuya and Dondozo has, maybe it doesn't, but there's a tournament that was only like Scarlet and Violet, like it was F block, no, G block. Is that where we're in now? It's whatever the current.
No, E block.
No, G is the newest block.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, D, E, yeah, we're in G
so
block
it was a G block tournament, single prizer.
only. Yeah.
And that was just grouped in this standard. It might be removed by now, but it like there's obviously one deck that's just like super Dundos and Tatsugiri, and it says all these people did like super well on at the tournament, and this deck's like so good, except it's obviously like not, because it's not standard format. So you need to be very
Yeah.
careful about that when you come down to these like weird niche decks.
Yeah, and I think you made a video about the deck with the highest win rate, but it was actually only played at a tournament. I think that was didn't allow Pokemon with abilities, if I remember.
Yeah,
Does that sound correct?
yeah,
Something like
yeah. I
that.
think something like
So
that.
again, but so if you see a deck that's not played much in particular, you might need to click to the event description if it seems like a really odd deck to have won well. There might be something unusual, and obviously people get lucky and such. So I see here Arceus Rayquaza, it's the
Yeah, this
highest win
with
rate,
a
but it wasn't
69th
played.
most played deck.
Right, played once. So, if you want to try the deck out, go ahead, but don't expect great things. But then as you start to go down, but you see the number of times it was played and the win rate, and you can kind of get a sense of what's enough plays to want to try it. Like you were playing Inteleon Urshifu this week, which I haven't tried. I need to do. It's got a good win rate. It's pretty high,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
just like
played
50, 52 and a half,
right.
which is good, solid.
Right. I mean, most of the top, that's better than any of the top few decks that in terms of that are played more. They don't have that high a
Yeah,
win
well,
rate.
Gudra is close. Gudra lost on
Right.
Lugia's
Just
kind of
behind it.
close,
Yes.
and some other builds decks.
Correct. But it's slightly better than all those other decks. But obviously play less, but play 200 plus times, so enough times to be meaningful in its win rate, right? So it's a good way to get some ideas, especially if you think like often in the meta, there's like three or four decks that kind of dominate, but you'll see a number of other decks that are very strong plays if you want a deck you can win with, but that is different than what the majority of people are playing. So it's a good way, I think, to find some ideas when I want, particularly a deck that's decent and want to try something. Or sometimes, if there's I'm looking for a deck idea or I want to try something with Arcanine EX, I might go to Limitless too and search it up. Obviously, you can do that too when you're doing it.
Yeah, I think I think it's Limitless is like, in my opinion, the best resource to figure out what deck to play. Whether you want a
Yeah.
really good deck or you want like a kind of sketchy deck, or something that's like a bit more rogue, you can definitely find all that on Limitless.
Yeah.
One thing I don't love is searching the other categories. Kind of hard to find stuff. So if you want to find super
Yeah.
crazy decks, you need to probably look at individual tournaments. But there's so
Yes.
much stuff out there, and it's really nice. Oh, and one other site, that I guess you should probably talk about this some, because you like better decks than me, right?
Usually, especially, it's nice to feel like I can win games at least, right? I would say. So anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead. So
Um,
what is you're talking about?
yeah. So the website that you use, I know, is I don't know if you still use this, but you use Trainer Hill, right? A very competitively focused website.
I will sometimes. I haven't used it. I will occasionally, but yeah, it is a good site. It talks about the meta, how much is played. It's got a number of good filters on it so I recommend. It is worth checking out. It talks about what the current meta is. It's got little like graphs with like what's rising in plays and dropping in plays. If you want to try to predict the meta, if you're going into an event, either IRL or online, I'm not worried about that. But it's there, and then also how decks. It shows you very easily how every deck matches up against every other deck amongst like you can choose like 12 decks and see what the matchup spread is to which is good, right? Because there's always like a certain number of 4 or 5 decks that are played a lot, and you probably want to usually pick a deck that's at least solid against those. So you can look for one that's got, say, a decent matchup against those. You can look for one that targets down, say, the top 3 decks and has a lot of bad matchup otherwise, but beats the top plays, right? So it gives you information like that, and it tells you if you want to try to fine tune your 60. What different like counts of all the different cards. Like you can look at a Dialga V Star deck, and it will tell you all the different cards that the deck may play and how many counts people play, and then what the win percentage is with the different counts of that card. Like it would write on EX if they play 0, 1, 2, 3, and then what the win rate is. You can use that to try to build your deck. Although you have to obviously think of it as a synergy of all the cards together, but it can get a sense. If you're thinking, do I play 3 of this or 4 of this trainer? It might give you a sense of what to try out.
Yeah, I think it's like it's not a website. As I said, I don't use it, and you don't use it that much. But if you
No.
want to be a competitive player, it's, I think, an amazing resource. Because it gives you like so much data and like sorted. I believe it just uses data from Limitless or Play Limitless,
I
but
think so. Yeah.
it's actually, it's probably, is it owned by Limitless? I used it to not be, but it might be owned now. Is Limitless a company? It's not, is it? I don't know.
I don't know who owns and control, but it is by. Is it Philip Schultz connected with it? Robin
Schultz
Schultz. I'm sorry.
is like I believe the person who runs it.
Hmm.
But anyway, so I think like you're certainly looking for like good decks is a solid way to do it. But also
Yep.
definitely you want to like play decks that you enjoy.
Hmm.
So like I don't really like. Well, what I enjoy in the deck is I enjoy unique, like different possibilities in the game. So I don't really like decks like there aren't as many straightforward just attacking decks now, but something like Mew VMAX, Vegeta Lucky VMAX with Miraidon
Hmm.
EX. I find those decks kind of boring. Pretty much anything where you just have one attacker. Obviously, you have different options in those decks. You can go in with various attacks in both of them, but
Hmm.
I find them a bit boring. And so that's why I like decks like Lost Zone. I also like I don't know. There's a lot of decks with various attacks now, which is cool. I like
Hmm.
Zoroark toolbox decks. So I like decks
Yeah.
with various possibilities.
Yeah, you like box decks, and obviously one of the reasons you hate Malamar or Upstruck Malamar is you attack one a Pokemon with one attack, and you can only attack the active basically. So super limited there. So you like options, you like box decks. I like decks that set up more. I gotta say, I like decks where I feel the deck works because I really just hate when the deck doesn't operate for me. Like I get, and I don't, and I'm one of the issues which I didn't even like when Lugia before rotation was so good. It was just a bit. If you set up, you were great, and if you didn't set up, you were just in a world of hurt. And I just didn't like that really high roll aspect of it. There were like consistent decks. I like decks that set up. I do like comeback ability also. I gotta say. So Rapid Strike Urshifu back in the day. I don't know if it's the same way now with the current build. It was a little high roll, which I didn't like, I often could fall behind like 3 or 4 prizes and still win the game because all of a sudden I would just take a 5 prize turn and be like, I'm losing. Oh wait, I take 5 prizes this turn. Good game. So a comeback is always nice in a deck too.
Yeah, but I believe when you were talking about that deck, you said you didn't like the aspect that like you were losing the whole game.
That's true. They were very stressful games because I felt like, oh, I'm out of this game. I'm out of this game. Um, and need in a deck like that, you need very specific set of pieces that aren't always easy. So that's true. And like having artillery is a hugely powerful card, but getting it set up and not having it set up when you need it and not getting it knocked out so that you can't play your next turn. I don't like that so much. Whereas I guess like with a Miraidon deck, you just you can attack essentially with every Pokemon except Radiant Greninja if you play that and such. So you pretty much everything has a value and a place, and you can
Yeah.
work with it.
One thing as I said, I was playing the Inteleon VMAX Urshifu VMAX deck, and I was playing this game. I think it was yesterday, which would be the time doesn't really matter for this, but I was playing it, and it was actually I matched into someone I was on live, someone who was like drastically higher in rank than me. This is the first time I played against anyone above, I think 1,000. My rating is like 800 or 700 or something. I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
like average. And I consider myself a pretty solid player. But they were like substantially higher than anyone I've ever matched against, which makes you kind of
Yeah.
question why I was matched against them. But anyways, so I was kind of nervous if they were just gonna wreck me. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't. I have to say, I don't think they were that. I don't know if they were better than me. They probably weren't. I don't know. But so one thing I of course noticed is of course they get into the emote spamming. Right, that's like the obvious thing you do if you're a higher level. But so aside from that, They were playing Lost Zone, and I was playing Italiana Urshifu. So if you don't know, Italiana Urshifu is like kind of favored in there, but I got off to like an awful start. And so they just kind of started like carrying all my Pokemon. And essentially I had done no damage. They actually got their Dragonite V up, and they started like KOing like all my V, like KO'd my V the turn I got into play. And so eventually I was at a point where I hadn't taken VMAX. I'd hit into the Dragonite V once, but it wasn't too much, obviously, and I hadn't taken any prizes. They were one turn away from winning the game.
Hmm.
I just had Inteleon VMAX in play. If they KO'd that, they'd take all their prizes. And it had like 70 HP left. And all of a sudden, I looked at the board and I realized, oh wait, I can just go ahead, Machamp V, and Inteleon Ping, and I KO'd a Comfey, another Comfey, a Manaphy, a Cramorant, and a Dragonite in essentially one turn. I used Machamp V, but across those two back-to-back turns, I took KO'd five Pokemon, took 6 prizes. And I feel like that's just kind of like the silly like comeback mechanic is kind of fun. And honestly, it's just cool. One thing is that is very fun because I think Pokemon's all about fun. You always want to choose the deck that gives you the most fun, but one thing that gives you so much fun is if you just like completely obliterate your opponent. Obviously, it was a very close game, but I just completely like cooked them at the end, and it was I enjoy. That's honestly why I enjoy ADP because it was so good. It's like I'd always win. Not always, but pretty much always win because you'd just be like, oh, you have this deck. Oh, well, I'm going to take extra prizes and do extra damage and one-shot all your Pokemon, and now you lost.
Yeah, I mean, coming back is always fun, and surprising your opponents, I think, is fun, right? Playing a deck that you doing something to win that they're not expecting is a fun aspect. This week for me, like I said, playing some of the EUIC decks, and there is the Lost Zone deck with the stall aspect, and
Yeah,
I
I was
started
saying I was
playing.
saying the UIC decks, most of the decks that you said like the Mew deck and the Rhydon deck, but those
Yeah,
aren't really anything like new, were they?
no, they weren't. I mean, the Miraidon, like I like Miraidon, so there's obviously some little differences. They played a little more energy, one or two more than other decks played, which I think helped. They also got rid of any things like Klefkis or anything to try to help. It just was they were all in what they did, which I think, and obviously it worked for them. So I think that was part of it. So, you can pay attention to the little things if you want, particularly a deck like that for me, which I like the deck. But it's nothing radically different. The Mew deck was very, uh, again, it's a couple of different cards out of the 60 change, but not a big deal. I think the stall aspect though of the Lost Zone that was different. I hadn't really seen that before, so I liked seeing that. And then playing that at first, I think started playing that right away. It caught people by surprise for the first day or two a lot of times. So, because you kind of set up like a Lost Zone deck, and all of a sudden they're terroring through their deck, getting ahead in the prize race, and boom, I gust up something, and and I have game, and
Wait,
they're stuck.
against Lost Zone? Oh no, you
Or
were Lost Zone and they
I
were
was
like
playing
doing something.
Lost Zone. They were that, it could be Lost Zone if they weren't thinking about it, or like a Lugia deck or a Mew deck, and they're discarding their pieces to get going, which is normally what you want to do. But
Yeah.
every time they discard a switch card or something, I'd be like, all right, I'm that much closer to game here.
Yeah, because it uses the Mawile from, I believe, Lost Origin. Tempting
Hmm.
Traps essentially just for one energy stops your opponent from retreating. There's actually
Right.
various measures of counterplay, but you can like gust up other Pokemon. Um, but then also there's Infinite with Pidgeot V. You could try to
Yeah.
Path. There are various things, but yeah, I think this is becoming more of a known factor in my opinion. And
Hmm.
also, it does actually seem play in other decks. I think there's an Urshifu deck I was looking at, an Urshifu Inteleon deck that actually played Mawile. I didn't end up choosing that list, but yeah, I think I like the idea of, and this is like the definition of a deck with multiple win conditions. Obviously,
Hmm.
you have the idea of just attacking, but you also have the idea of like decking them out. And
Right.
honestly, one thing that I don't know if this is good or bad about in-person tournaments versus online tournaments, in just general play. In these like hyper competitive events, there's a lot of metagaming, where people
Yeah.
are just choosing specific counter cards. So Mawile is an example of this type of specific counter card,
Hmm.
where it's used to just counter very specific things. Notably, I'd say Radiant Greninja and Gardevoir EX. If that gets stuck in the active, Gardevoir probably loses, but they can always just play a switch or two, and they're probably fine. So
Hmm.
I think this Mawile is gonna fade out. Because it's not going to have as much value if people learn and I predict people will learn eventually. If everyone gets
Yeah.
boss trapped by Mawile, they're gonna start putting Switch in all their decks. Which it doesn't feel good to just like be decked out. Or I guess the other option is people put Pidgeot V in their decks, so that both players are just using Pidgeot V and never decking out, which would
Yeah.
be less exciting because the games would never end. But that is an option as well. And I've actually seen Pidgeot V. I saw Pidgeot V in a Lost Zone deck. It was not this deck, not the deck with Radiant Charizard. I know it was played in EUSD, but it was it did play the Pidgeot V, and so they could just be going for the idea that if your deck's infinite, my deck's also infinite, and neither of us is going to deck out. Then you could, I was going to say, are there ways of milling? But those, oh yeah, you could stick in like some mill attacker. I'm not super familiar with the mill attackers right now. I know that Bunnelby rotated. You still have Carbonal V. You still have Sandile. I don't know if there's a replacement for Bunnelby. I feel like there probably is, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you could try milling. Obviously, then you're not attacking with a Mawile. I mean, you could do something like Misfortune Sisters and get rid of their items, which is their primary way of switching, right? So, that could, if you want. I mean, obviously, if you're playing on live, then it's a matter of who can click the buttons faster if both players play a Pidgeot, right? So hopefully, hopefully there's not too much Mawile around because it will make things, I think, a bit unfun. But like you said, it was put in specifically for a tournament, which is one of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at decks, especially the IRL decks.
Oh,
Right
maybe the
now,
Sandile also rotated.
what was that?
Maybe the Sandile also rotated.
Okay, that could be. I'm not sure. But because right now, I think the Gardevoir EX decks don't play any switch, right? Because they can just attach, retreat, and re-accelerate the energy. So it was kind of a wasted deck slot to put a switch card in. So it was part of it was to take advantage of that. So Gardevoir, you don't play switch card, you're going to lose the game. It was kind of part of why it was built at this time with that way.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of interesting seeing people like putting these different attacks. Honestly, most people I think tend to play very passively in terms of like their deck ideas, that they just want to go with what they know because it's obviously just easier. Oh, okay. I found the card. It's Litwick from Lost Origin. You can put that in your decks if you want to be able to counter Pidgeot. But anyways, so yeah, I think you just, I don't know. You just want to just do what you enjoy. Don't just copy other people either, and also experiment. This is actually where it becomes kind of weird between the casual and like ranked ladder, or was it ladder?
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know what we call it. Yeah.
Yeah, like most people that I know just play, like I just play ranked because like your rank doesn't matter. That's one thing I think everyone needs to remember. Your rank does not matter. Don't get all like toxic. I know I can get toxic. I know my opponents can definitely get toxic as well. Try to remember that the rank doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter if you win or lose. Just kind of have fun with it. Obviously, it matters who you match up against, but it'll eventually match you up against opponents at the same skill level. Because that's just the whole point of a rank ladder, unless it stops working, in which case it doesn't matter your rank anyways. So, yeah, I think you just want to do like fun decks. But I don't like doing awful decks. I recently played a Claydol deck. Honestly, is it awful? It was bad. It's like no supporters. The Claydol accelerates energy if you have no supporters in your discard. It's kind of questionable though. So I feel like you want to play a deck that's at least decent, but I also like experimenting with new ideas or decks that are just new to me. I feel like I need to be able to bounce around to different decks to be able to keep myself like refreshed and renewed with Pokemon, because there have been times where I just don't have interesting decks to play and I just get completely burnt out.
Yeah, there's times that something new is you got to find for that. Now because again, you got to know yourself. You like to switch decks a lot more than I do because I get a bit of a sense looking at the deck list of something, but it's not until I play it and really play it multiple times that I start to get the rhythm of the deck. So for me, if I want to kind of playing a deck 10 times is kind of it. That's just like the getting to know you stage. Like 10 times, I've kind of barely got to know the deck at that point for me. So whereas you're probably done with the deck and don't want to see it again after that. So
yeah, most times like if you see me play a deck on video, there's a good chance I haven't played it again since that video. Especially if it's like some weird deck. Because most of those decks aren't that good. And I'm not a great deck builder either, so I think most people aren't that good deck builders.
Mhm.
Something I should probably work on, but I'm not an awful deck builder. But um, if you're not a good deck builder, it's just kind of hard to innovate. You certainly
Mhm.
can tweak an existing deck, but making a new deck from scratch, which I've done, like the list I'm looking at, it's a Luxray Godvar EX deck.
Mhm.
Like the cards aren't quite right, because I just don't know exactly what I'm trying to do here. Um, I don't have quite the feel for just throwing something together, and I don't really want to test it that much. I want to just have a deck and it just works, and so that's why most people just
Yeah.
go to net decks. But you need to, I think you should at least try to tweak decks, and it's not that hard to do. You just kind of know what's not working for you, what's working for you, and then you actually have different lists because sometimes you just see everyone rocking with the same list, and like it's okay, but you're losing out on a lot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like we talked at the start about net decking, which I think is certainly a good thing to do. It's a good way to get ideas and find decks you like. But ultimately, you should work on your own decks. Modifying decks you have is making a deck your own, which I've enjoyed that. Like when I was playing Ice Rider a bunch, and it was solid. It wasn't the BDIF, and maybe it's kind of in the range of where Miraidon EX is. Again, another solid deck that's consistent, but isn't going to be the best probably. But like I got to the point where I knew for the Ice Rider Inteleon deck, I got to an exact 60 I liked, and I knew why every card in the 60 was, and I knew with the last couple pieces what they could or couldn't be and what the pros and cons were. And I like getting to that point. That point that became a deck that was one. I owned the deck in that sense, and I like that rather than just moving around all the time. You digging into a deck is something I think is worthwhile too.
Yeah. And I think it's time to move into our next segment. Do you have anything else to
Okay.
add about decks?
No, I mean, I think we said, well, I'll just say, play something fun, right? In what that means to you, figure it out, but don't just play whatever the top, whatever somebody says are like the S and A tier decks. There's a lot of other decks that are certainly viable to do. So try things out, have some fun. Um, and then I think what the other thing we want to talk about alternate formats now, right? Which certainly can tie into the choosing a deck.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think I want to start with the fact I play alternate formats. I don't necessarily play. I don't know. I play some. I've been sticking with more standard because that's definitively now standard is the most accessible format.
yeah,
But I play some other formats, and I in the past have definitely played a lot more than I think you because this connects back to the idea that I get bored with stuff,
right.
and you like to just learn something, and you like to just stay with one deck, and be boring, right?
Well, I mean, honestly, even like if you stay with standard, besides just staying with one deck, just trying to know what, like, say, the top 10 to 20 decks that you're going to see most frequently are, and kind of what the 60 is for them, more or less. It's a lot to me to get around. Whereas every time you switch to a new format, all that changes. Not just your deck's different, but all the decks you're up against. And so, to what extent is that fun to flit around versus not? And that somewhat depends on personality. And because we alternate formats, you've done them, but you tend to you don't stick with one that long either. I would say.
Yeah, I think one thing, there are a few things that are like key things to understand alternate formats in Pokemon. One is that most of them are flops. If people make their own Pokemon formats,
Mhm.
they usually fall apart. Usually the creator just gets bored. We've even seen this with
Yeah,
GLC now, which is like the alternate format that people talk about.
yeah,
That's not official. And then, although you could make a soft argument that it's official, but and then also there's the idea that I think that a good alternate format, it has a limited amount of life unless it's like super good because once it gets fleshed out and becomes competitive, it gets hurt. This is why I used to play a lot of GLC. I mean, not that much, but I used to like, I still like GLC. I like the ideas behind GLC. But one A
Mhm.
has kind of like died out, unfortunately. It's not dead, but oh, I'm not sure if it's dead, but it's essentially it's on its way out. I predict no one will be playing it within a few years from now. But that's because when a format's new, it's fresh and well, it's fresh, but also it's not as competitive. So that means you can just go
Mhm.
ahead and make what you want, and you can really play the game like you want and win. Versus when it gets more like defined, you will you're going to be playing the decks you like, and now you're going to start losing, and that's not a good feeling. You're just going to kind of feel defeated, and it's not as fun because now all these decks that are cool you can't play anymore. You have to play certain top decks, and we've seen that with GLC. GLC at the very beginning, there's so many unique ideas, and it was fresh, but it was also like diverse because you could do what you want and you can personalize yourself in your own deck. Now, if you play GLC, you got to play very specific things. You don't really have a chance to put your own spin on it, and it's just kind of boring. Especially because like so many competitive players have drifted towards that, that it actually takes. It's not necessarily like they're doing anything wrong. Like everyone wants to do the best they can, but like it takes a lot of the fun out of it.
Yeah, I mean GLC. I mean, part of why it happened, I would say two things. One, obviously, a big person behind it, Andrew Mahone. Without that, it couldn't have gotten going. And the
Don't
other
call him a
thing,
big person. That's kind of mean.
all right, a big YouTube following. How about that?
Yeah.
But and then because of COVID was a boost for it too, because IRL play was stopped, which obviously he's a big IRL person, and a lot of the audience was committed to focused on that too, and that didn't happen. So looking for an alternate way to do things, right? And official events, and even once like the cat informal IRL events started back, but it was a long time before official events took place again. So it created a vacuum, a place that it could start, which is hopefully we don't get have that happen again anytime
What,
soon.
COVID?
So exactly, and locking
Yeah.
down the world, right?
Yeah, that'd
So
be kind of bad.
so it's hard to find the pieces to make it now. Um, but like Gym Leader Challenge or something like anything that has a very vast card pool, right? Because this Gym Leader Challenge, is it unlimited in its cards you can use? Is that correct?
No,
I mean, I know it's got its restrictions of what you can't play, but is there a time? How far back does it
it's
go?
expanded. It was playable
Expanded.
on
Okay.
PTCGO. Now, another reason is I guess we'll talk about this, but you can't play it on live. You can't play it on
Hmm.
PTCGO either.
Well, PTCO you can't. Well, you migrated, which I don't think you said at the start, right?
Oh,
So that
I
was
have
part of
my.
your
Did I do it
your
this past
week.
week? Oh wow,
I
yeah,
think it
that
was
feels
right.
like so long ago. I've kind of blocked out. I think I actually migrated before.
I think you did
Um,
right after the podcast
right after.
recording. I
Oh, I did.
think.
I migrated right
See, I
after.
think I think I kind of talked you into it last week, so you can blame me for that if you want to. But you can't do it on PTCGO because they don't have Scarlet and Violet. Is that your point there?
Yes, and that's not a huge deal, but as more sets get added, obviously it
Yeah.
becomes a bigger deal, and also it's PTCGO's. It's not exactly supported. Live's not exactly supported either, but there's essentially nowhere. I mean, you can play in person, but like, let's be honest, you
Right.
can't really play it in person, not at like a larger level, and it's kind of there are some issues, including the tropical beach issue, which is kind of it's I don't know, it's kind of problematic. I don't has it been banned? I have not. I've kind of stopped following the format of it, so.
Right. And you and I, we're online players,
Yeah. As are, I
and
imagine, many of the people listening are probably um, at least play online some. Probably
right.
play more
Well,
online than in person.
yeah, I would think that's my guess is that most people listening play more online than IRL. I could be wrong about that, and you can let us know in the comments um, where you stand on that. But s- and obviously in live, well, there were alternate formats in PTCG, right? They had themed, which was a casual format, which obviously we've talked about in the past, right? So I don't, live certainly needs something more casual. It had Legacy, which was obviously a kind of flawed because it was hard to get some of the cards, and that was a completely closed set of cards, so it could be a solve the meta, which isn't great. But an expanded just wasn't even very healthy, right? There were a lot of bad games you'd get with that. So, but in live, you have basically you only have one format really, and that's standard, right? There is expanded,
Yeah, which is
but you
branded as expanded beta, which is really bad. It's literally in a beta, and it's a beta within a beta, which just isn't good.
right, and it's only casual. It's not ranked. So,
And you
like
can't
even
play against your friends. Yeah, that's what it
right,
is.
which means you can't play against friends, and like even like standard casual, which I think we've both done it a few times. You see a lot of, if it's a place like for new players and to try out a new or rogue deck, I don't mind that. But a lot of it's just not very good, right? And casual, I think. So at beta, you can't invite your friends. So even if you want to play expanded, and it's a truncated expanded because they don't have all the cards, right? They have what, like half the cards or something like that.
Yeah, around that.
So
It's Sun and Moon on.
okay, which I don't literally mind that as a format to try out, but the fact is you can't play with your friends with it, and obviously you couldn't do something like a GLC format or something that using the expanded cards that Live has. Anything you want to be able to play with friends, or if someone wants to run a tournament on Limitless, has to be standard because that's the only way you can invite a friend or someone to play with. So you're limited to a truncated version of standard if you want to do really an alternate format in live, I would say.
Yeah. Did you talk about themed format?
I brought it up, but I didn't discuss
Yeah.
it really. Um,
So I think one thing that, as you said, the casual format is where like newer players play. And actually, I saw someone on
yeah,
the live forums, which are really like kind of bad, by the way. They're not like it's people complaining, understandably complaining. I
yeah,
myself am probably complaining a little. And people, it's like there's these glitches either that are just completely ignored by Pokemon. I don't even know if the format's monitored. You can send in support tickets, which are monitored, but they're
right.
not. Like people like live just like deletes half of them. I think like if you just send it in, they just get rid of it, which is not good either. But then on the forums, it's just kind of messy. But so someone was complaining that they're presumably, I'm assuming they're a new player, um,
Hmm.
and like brand new to the Pokemon game as a whole.
Right.
And so they were saying that like I'm like losing, right? My opponents are like substantially better than me, and their decks are substantially better than me. If you're one tip for newer players, definitely just play the starter decks. They are solid decks. You'll get a feel for
Hmm.
what's good, but
Yeah.
in addition to that, like they're kind of complicated to play for like a brand new player. There's nothing like the theme deck format's way easier at a beginner level, which is actually really interesting. It's people therefore actually dismissed it at a higher level, saying it's like if you're a good player,
Hmm.
it's a solved format. It's not. It's actually complicated at a higher level with the various like high level complications, ideas of like um, not as much stuff like deck thinning, but like prize
Hmm.
routing, just choosing how to like play your game as a whole.
Yeah.
But you will always have access to whatever Pokemon you need pretty easily. Unlike standard, where the difference between for probably I imagine many of you, it's obvious whether you want to search out. Say your Inteleon V, like I'm looking at this deck, or your Radiant Alakazam, the one's an attacker, the one's this weaker support Pokemon. But to a newer player, you don't necessarily know what the value of any card is in a deck. The card you're searching for isn't obvious.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like a veteran player, like I don't think about most of the basic actions too much, and most people don't. They go through them pretty quickly. But as a new player, you need to think about every action because you don't know what you're doing. And
Yeah.
so themed has less of those like quote unquote simple actions where you just like search for Pokemon because there's less search. So you evolve your Pokemon, you play your Pokemon, you attach energy, you attack. And you get the basic ideas, and you will then develop strategies as you go. But you won't be overwhelmed at the beginning too much. I don't think. I think it's very accessible. And because it was very accessible, but now that PTCGO is kind of shutting down,
Right.
I think the casual format just isn't good enough because it just isn't.
Yeah, I mean, starter was, I mean, themed was a nice thing. It was for new players, and you had to really, they forced you into it. It wasn't bad. Now they forced you into that really terrible challenge system, whatever it was that you had to do.
The
That was
trainer
the trainer
challenges.
challenges or whatever it was
Those weren't
called,
that
right?
bad. I feel like I mean, they were kind of stupid. No offense, but like
Well,
they 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 were like very strange. The AIs were truly awful, and
right.
it was very strange. But you'd learn the game, I think.
But they gave you I mean, but they gave the decks they gave you because they were so old were no good, even once you could
Oh
play
yeah, you need to grind the trainer
on the
challenges and
ladder.
then buy a deck. There's like specific things you have to do, and if you don't do it
Ye-
right, you just like have no shot, which is
Right.
problematic, right? I think that has to do with the economy of PCGO, which is kind of bad. Lives is actually better, I think substantially better with a few exceptions.
Yeah, I mean the starter decks are decent, and the AI. I think I've done a little bit of testing with new decks against the AI. It's okay. I mean, it's not making great choices,
I say it's
but a
about as
PT
good as like an average ladder player.
it could be. But PTCGL was horrible. Like they would deck themselves out and stuff, like intentionally. Like they had a draw two attack, and it would just draw two every turn until they decked out and stuff. And it's like you should be trying to get players better. So
Yeah, I
those
think the AI
things
in
are
live is
better.
like okay. I think it also the decks in live are like actual decks that are like
Yeah.
decent. And I think they like play a little better. I don't know how it's coded, but they pit you against the starter decks, which is kind of interesting. And
Hmm.
I think it's cool. It's definitely better. I don't think it's great. I don't know if it like actually has like an AI. I don't know exactly what that's defined as, but I don't.
Yeah, I don't know
I think it's
how
I think
smart it
they've done
is.
it pretty. It doesn't just like I don't think it's gonna like lose itself the game, which is better than the PTCGO AIs. But yeah, but I definitely like. I think live needs like a beginner format. It needs some way to introduce players. I believe there's like a basic introduction, but I believe it just like plays the game for you. Essentially, it like tells you exactly what to
Yeah.
do, and then it just pops you into the game, which is good for a player who's not new. But if you're new, right, I think the online client should be the best way to get players into the game because it's the most
Yeah.
accessible. It's free, right? You can essentially get every card for free. Um, except like, but then you're gonna be lost, right? You're gonna be lost. You need to go to outside help, and then
Hmm.
that actually hurts the experience for a new player as well. I think many players best memories with the game, where if you, I mean, it depends how old you are, but playing casually as a child, like just
Hmm.
I think that's many players' favorite memories are like just getting into it, playing just messing around and having a good time. And I think an online client could be a way to do that, but not in the way it is now. I think it's just not really doable.
Yeah, I mean they need. I agree. Something for new players, which they could have a starter deck only section or something. I'm not sure. There need to be enough players also so that you can match in consistently. But something for new people with decks that are obviously accessible. You don't want people to have to spend a lot to get the decks either. So that starter decks may be the place to go. And now look at the starter decks. There's out of the eight you get, there's decent choices for a new player. I think the Luna Tone Soul Rock deck is a good choice for a new player. It's not the best deck in the world, but the other starter decks aren't either. It's pretty straightforward to play. I think the Regieleki deck is fairly forward to play. The Arcanine deck is reasonable to play. That one's a little harder. The Dialga deck is decent to play. I think for someone new,
Yeah, I think
the
most of them
mechan
are like you should definitely like try them all out. And then if you find
yeah.
it too overwhelming, just change. You'll find something that you should be able to work with, and definitely play the casual ladder. I think the rank ladder will be a bit more intimidating. Uh, yeah, right.
Yeah. Although if you find yourself in casual always getting big decks, then maybe try the ranked as you get to understand the deck because you should be getting other new players there with low level decks. I would hope anyway, right?
Yeah,
If the matchmaking
there's
is
like the
appropriate.
baby league. I don't think it's actually called the baby league, but it's the
Oh,
quick league. But all the Pokemon
is
are
that what
baby
it?
Pokemon. So and I
Yeah.
believe that one. I don't know. I've never gotten back into it. Like, did I go back? I guess I went back to Poke League, but like playing quickly, I think most of the players here are new players. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, now they're new accounts, right? Now, majority of
Oh yeah,
new accounts are people that have played before, probably either IRL or PTCGO. So that's the hard part. But if I would imagine if you're in the quick league long enough, you're going to get enough matches against new players that you'll start to get some wins. And so anyway, so in terms of alternate formats, like you said, I mean, if you want to play in live, you've got to do some form of standard, right? Where you're just removing cards like a single prize format or something. That's really the only thing that's viable at this point if you really want to, because you probably want to play with your friends. Yes, you could do something and expand it and give yourself a challenge, but then you're matching up against random people who probably have better decks and are going to roll you over,
I
right?
don't know about that. I think I've been told that the expand ladder is like about as like bad, like it's just standard decks that are like bad. But
Yeah,
I don't know about that one. But if you're just implementing challenges, it's not exactly an alternate format either. Something like a
right.
well, there aren't really alternate formats in the video game. Maybe there. I mean there are, but like a Nuzlocke isn't an equivalent to a format at all. So forget about that. But
Mhm.
like you can do what you're thinking of is like singleton standard, single pricer standard, that type of thing,
Right.
right?
Right, something like that, which I think is a fun way to do it. But if you want to do it yourself, just and go on the ladder, you're just at a disadvantage, which probably isn't going to be fun for long. Um, you can do it with friends, like you said, if you keep restricted to standard only, and that's not a terrible notion. You're trying to do that with your random deck format, right?
Yeah,
That's
random
just
battles.
random random battle format. Is that what's
I
the official
guess
name?
I don't know.
You don't know yet. Okay,
No, but check that. I've made some content on that. I'm gonna do some more. I've been kind of busy, but I think I have a link to my Discord server on my channel now, so you can check that out. But I think like you need to play it as far in standard, because if
yeah.
it's not, you just can't really play it. I think single price standard. You haven't played any of that.
The random battles. No,
No,
because
you
I'm
haven't played any of the other formats either, right? Oh, wait, you haven't like done it. You haven't done anything because you haven't crafted anything, right?
right. Since Scarlet and Violet came out, I'm just to understand the economy better until I finish the battle pass to tier 50. I'm not craft spending any of my resources, so I'm almost there though. So the next couple days, I will be done there and get to take a look at how the economy is working for me. But yes, so that's why I can't even afford to. I can't like even for your random battles decks. I don't have the cards to build any of those decks yet, from what I've seen. So, um, and obviously that's you wanted to make it to be accessible because they're all low cost cards.
Yeah,
But I
it's a
don't
very
have
accessible format. And I think that's good. I think one thing with as you said, you don't have all the cards, but I think one of the most important things about alternate formats is accessibility. And so
yeah.
obviously, like just being able to play it somewhere is important, but also cheapness. That's honestly
Hmm.
like so GLC. I think GLC. I need to make a video on this sometime. I've said this for a long time, but GLC had a few main principles that was built on that why it was so good. And why it started to fall apart is it's broken these principles. One is it's very simple. This is
Hmm.
it's very important for an alternate format. Something like single price standard, singleton standard, anything like that. GLC is very simple, with a few basic rules. Single price, singleton,
Hmm.
expanded format, monotype, and there were intended to be no bans to end up actually being bans, which hurt the format. And clearly, it was
Hmm.
obvious from the way Andrew Hunt was like treating the format. He did not want to ban cards, because it broke that one of those main principles. But it ended up having to be implemented.
Yeah.
And there wasn't too much you could do about that. But the next one I'd say is, of course, accessibility, and this is one is also like it's we've talked about this. It's like the idea that I need to be able to play the format on something.
Right.
We really need to be able to play it on PTCG Live now. But in the then you could play it on PTCGO, and it was very accessible. And also the fact
Right.
that the cards need to be accessible, right? So,
Hmm.
and if the cards are cheap, they're more accessible. And then in person, the cards also need to be accessible. So the newer the cards
Yeah.
are, the more accessible they are, right?
Yeah, and obviously there was probably, I imagine, some older cards that were really good that were hard to get just because they were so old. And
But they weren't like
people,
that old either. So you could get pretty much all the cards.
yeah. And if they get to the point, and I assume they will, where expanded's fully playable and live, then it's easier to get the cards than it was in PTCGO. So in terms of online playing, if live becomes what it should be playable in live if that's what people want to do.
Yeah, definitely. Although I believe they have said that they're not adding all the cards this year. I don't
Yeah,
know if they said that officially, but it was heavily implied. It said for the 2020, I want to say it's here, and it's just the Scarlet and Violet is here. Um, Standard
yeah.
rotation. Yeah. So it says on the. Do you see? Are you also looking at it?
No, do you have it there?
So yeah, but I'll tell you. So you go to the
I
top, like the kebabs in the top right, and then you
well,
can
where are you at?
and
What
decks. But if you
website are you at?
go on live, I'm in live.
You're in live. Oh, okay, in live.
You're in
Okay.
live, and you just click on the top, the three things in the top right,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it's the Scarlet and Violet's here. You click on that. I think it's the fourth one, Here you see it now. And anyone
Okay.
following along at home, that's how you get there. Although you can probably see it as well. That probably wasn't very useful advice. But it says there is rotation, which if you don't know, I guess I imagine most of you know what rotation is, but it removes a year's worth of cards. I know many people do not who are newer to the game. It's to keep it fresh. But then
Yeah,
it's
that's actually good to mention because people, if they've listened this long, know what it is. But one of the things in looking at the forums, there, especially with the rotation happened for the first month or more, which I guess we're still there. There were a lot of people saying, "What happened to my cards? I can't play my decks anymore." So rotation happens every year. It's not a bad thing.
it did happen
It
early on live. That's one thing to keep in mind,
it
which was
did
a
happen
mistake.
earlier than yeah, that was an issue. But even after that, a lot of people just didn't understand what rotation is. And obviously, if you're a new player, and hopefully lives bringing new people in, you need to know that.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with not knowing it, but that
No,
you will learn because when you can't play your decks, and
right.
so obviously that's something, and they do tell you, they literally tell you, I believe when you log into the game they will tell you, but so it says that the E, F, and G are still supported in the standard format, which is
Yep.
just what rotation is. And then it says the expanded beta format will remain unchanged for the 2023 season, maintaining the Sun and Moon series forward. So this could
Right.
just refer to the when it ends in 20, like the quote unquote season, I believe ends with the Worlds in, I want to
Yeah.
say
What
September,
September was it? Something like
maybe.
that. Yeah. So it,
Um, so it could be that. It could be. Is this considered the 2023 format, or is it next year? Because it could even be um, next year's
well, they
format. I
say the
don't think so.
2023 season, which I think is the season ending this year.
Okay. I was originally thought this could be the end of the year as well. It might just be till the Worlds, which is many months away, to be honest. But
Yeah. I mean, at this point, obviously they're struggling to get just standard working. So I'm glad they're not working on expanding on developing a full expanded format just because they're struggling. They don't need more things to work with. As you know, they have a hard time addressing the issues in standard. So keeping it simple for them is a good move.
yeah, I think that's fine. Like realistically, expand we've said it's kind of bad. Because you're looking for like a healthy format with unique ideas, and I think
Yeah.
expanded has unique ideas, I guess. It's mostly just like stopping your opponent from playing any cards or carrying all their Pokemon. Like
Yeah.
there's what like the best decks. There are lots of like control like obnoxious, horrible, toxic decks to against. Like there's Vileplume, which is a basic immunity plus item lock, and then
Yeah.
there's Donk. That was a deck, which isn't that
Hmm.
good, but it's not so much play. There is like and lots of super turbo decks, which are kind of toxic, but I wouldn't say they're that toxic, but they're not actually. They're walled off by so many things. There are like
Yeah.
wall decks. There are like they're just so annoying to play against. And then there is one of the most problematic decks, which is I'd say recent. It's Dialga V Star plus because you can use both a V Star power and a GX attack, which is cool. The idea of that, except you could use I believe it was use Guillotine and I don't remember. No, you use Dialga V Star. So you use
Hmm.
Cyrus Prism Star to Dialga V Star to Guillotine and Garchomp, I think. Pretty much you just KO all your opponent's Pokemon and they couldn't do anything about it. I suppose if they had all their Pokemon if they had 3 Pokemon in play with over, how many HP? I think they couldn't be one shot. All 3 of their Pokemon in play couldn't be one shotted by Dialga V Star. Otherwise, you'd just lose. So it was this like outrageously overpowered deck, and that's how expanded works. And I think getting
Hmm.
back to GLC, the third idea is that you need to needs to just be like fun and kind of casual, and that those are related. You can have a fun competitive format,
Yeah.
but if it's exclusively competitive, I don't believe a format can be truly fun because if you just want to mess around and have a good time, if everyone's playing these super competitive decks, it's hard. And I believe you watched a video about Magic Commander format, right? And that mentions something like that.
Yeah, I mean, Commander within Magic it was designed to be played with your friends in a casual setting. It would be kind of like Cube format, I guess, in a sense, but Cube for Pokemon where you do the draft and also you
Wait, what?
Commander, you come with a pre-constructed deck and you play like with 4 people at the same time. Magic, like Pokemon, is a one versus one game, but they made it so that 4 people would actually play simultaneously, so you can kind of hang out with your friends, play IRL as a group, and kind of chat as you played. And actually, there's kind of this. depending how you do it, this unwritten rule, like how you had tiers for decks, the kind of ranking the decks on a 1 to 10 scale. And for most people, they would say commander decks should never be above a 10 level, a 7 level power. That you kind of want to get to a place where they're good, but you don't want them to be overpowering. You want to keep it fun for everyone to play. So, and even they kind of encourage people banning cards that would make things unfun. So, kind of keeping it enjoyable for kind of forcing everyone to play a quote fun deck.
Yeah, and I think that's something. So Pokemon, if you know the history of Pokemon, and I believe you have said this many times as well, Pokemon's based off of Magic in many ways. And
Mm-hmm.
you can see this very clearly in its custom forms. If you don't know, Magic has, well, Magic's a TCG with the Commander format, which is an alternate format that was developed by fans called,
Yes.
what's it called? Like the other name for the format? Like
What
something, something?
I don't remember, but it's like obviously like Pokemon is a 60 card deck and those things, but Commander's a 100 card deck with some different rules for it.
Yeah.
So
So Commander's like seen as the gold standard for alternate formats because it's literally, I believe it's the most played Magic format, which is crazy. It's not exactly officially supported, but like now they had
right.
to, right? It's just, and it's good. It's very good, I believe. I personally, I think you and I played it like once, but um,
Yeah, and it's a weird thing because it was started by fans. Um, and the company behind Magic, Wizards of the Coast, the rules are actually there's a quote a rules committee that's kind of chaired by the person that developed the game with some other players that they've expanded brought in over time, but they're the official rules people. I think that even Wizards of the Coast kind of recognizes this other group has control over this game, which is a weird dynamic.
yeah, but it probably makes it healthier. It keeps everyone in check.
Yeah, I mean, the people as they do complain about the rules committee, but I think everyone's glad that it's that rather than the official company doing it, which would be the same thing with Pokemon. If there was some fan format, and if it was run by fans, we'd be glad for that. But obviously, it's tough to get to that spot.
Yeah, and I think one thing is a lot of like custom alternate formats are based on Commander. Everyone looks at
Mhm.
Commander as like, we need Commander in Pokemon. That's what GLC is based on. There's a format called that gets tossed around so much. It's not very good, but it's interesting. It's called U150. All the Pokemon are. I don't know if it's 150 and under HP or 100 or less than that, but. The
Mhm.
idea is it's when people always complain about power creep. So they just they're like, oh, back in my day, I liked when Pokemon had like 2 HP and did half damage. But like, it's you probably want to get to the bigger numbers. But anyways, this had under 150 HP, so like weaker
Yep.
Pokemon. It's a super complicated ruling stuff, but it had 100 cards. It was singleton kind of, and it was like. It was very complicated, but it was clearly, it's like Pokemon trying to copy Commander. It's not that good. It just doesn't work. I don't think people should be copying Commander exactly, because it's not the same. But GLC is
Hmm.
loosely based on Commander. Well, I say it's Singleton,
It's
and that's
right.
about it. The only similarity, but it's um, like Commander is seen as this thing that people want to reach for in the Pokemon community. And I don't think that's necessarily what. I know it's so weird that it's like it's almost the ideal thing, but it appears to be out of reach.
Yeah, and the weird thing with in Magic, you can't Arena, which is the main online client now, can't play Commander, and I think what they've said it probably never will. They actually keep the old online client, kind of like if Pokemon maintained Live and PTCGO, because you could play Commander in the old format and old client, and so that still exists for those that want it. But they have like a singleton format in Arena that you can play with 60 card decks. So, you know, as we play online, and a lot of people do. So it has to be playable in live, I would think. So, but you can have a 60 card format that is singleton, as long as you come up with some rules that are. But as you said, it needs to be accessible. It needs to be simple too, right? Because we don't want too complicated coming up with the deck list with the rules um, because you've seen it too. When you look at alternate format decks on Limitless, a lot of the decks list when are submitted don't necessarily follow the format, right? There was a singleton format I think you're looking at
Yeah, there's
in
a
like
format. It was the Scarlet and Violet Dawn format, with single prize. It was pretty simple.
mhm.
Those are like two rules. It's just two rules. Just follow the two rules. And people are just submitting. And I think there were maybe. I'm gonna pull it up, but there was. I'll take a look. I think it was. And I know it's here somewhere. I literally was just looking at it. They're in the Dandos and Tatsugiri. Let's see. It looks like there were. I think there were 20 people, maybe 30. Let's see. So there were. Oh no, there were like 18 people here. And let's see. There's some decks under other, but let's see. There's obviously, so it's only like Dandos or Tatsugiri. You can do Palmy. You can do Maridon, single prize Maridon. There's some various options that were cool, but then you see someone rocking with
Mhm.
Arceus Giratina, someone with Giratina Lost Box, someone with Lost Box, someone with Shadow Rider, someone with Snorlax Stall, and I think someone else ran an illegal deck as well. Maybe not, but like that's like almost a third of the tournament is people running decks that aren't legal for the format. Obviously, you just like get kicked out because that's not like a thing you can do. So
Right.
that's like it needs to be, even if it's basic, like super simple. That's very simple. People just don't. I don't know. They don't. They don't think. They just want to be able to like rock up with something and play, and that's good. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily good that people aren't thinking, but it's good in the fact that Pokemon you should just be able to like play for fun, and with
Yeah.
these alternate formats it gets a little complicated. That's why you're looking at things that are just very simple, and also I'd argue that alternate formats are very good though because they can allow you to like rejuvenate your interest in Pokemon,
Hmm.
but you need to be if like in PTCGL, it's like very clear. Like I'm never really confused about. I guess maybe once or twice I've queued into the wrong format, but like you're not gonna play an illegal deck. It just doesn't let you do that. And like
Right.
I think it's pretty simple in PTCGO, and there I think all four formats in PTCGO are honestly pretty worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they've gone from having four formats that all work to having two formats, only one of which works in live, and they haven't been any indications that they're going to bring in anything beyond those two. I think they need to, and obviously they need to get stuff working too. So those choice, the options are nice. Having themed, we both enjoyed themed. It was better off the fact that was an option for sure. And like I said, it could be fun to try. It's nice having that option there. At this point, I think they better not bring back Legacy unless they're going to be able to give us our Legacy cards back again, because I think people would be very
I
upset about
guess
that.
it's not that many cards. It's like it's like a year's worth of cards, but I still get why people would be upset.
And I guess they're cheap to craft, so just be people will be unhappy the fact that they spent in some cases a bunch of resources in the past and lost them to have to re-get them. But that is the risk you play when you play in any online game at all. Things change, technology changes, companies change, and you can lose things. Thus far, Pokemon's been okay with that. Other games, there was a board game that had an online thing where you could buy the cards, and then another company bought the rights to do it. And your old account and everything you spent money on, hundreds of dollars in some cases, it all evaporated, right? So Pokemon certainly is better than that.
Yeah. I think people say that people like saying like ragging on Pokemon. We like ragging on Pokemon, but Pokemon's doing I mean, they made a very good game, and that's why we all
Hmm.
play it. But although it is honestly pretty like the more I've been thinking about it, the more I realize that Pokemon's like small in the grand scheme of things.
It is in
Even
the
compared to like
Pokemon.
Magic, it's like the TCG is small.
Right. Well, yeah, that's part of it is the TCG is just a little piece of Pokemon brand, so which makes it kind of weird.
I mean, it's a big
Uh,
piece. It's a very big piece, but
it is. I mean, I think part of why Live struggles is if all Pokemon had was the TCG, Live would have gotten better a lot faster, right? The fact that they have the video game and the anime and all that stuff means there's people that can go, let's not worry about it.
yeah.
All right. So, anything else to add about alternate formats at this point?
No, I think we've driven down a bit too much. Check out my random battles format. Check out my random battles format though.
Yeah, yeah. Check out the video. Obviously, you can find alternate formats on other sites, discussion of things. So take a look. Part of it's trying to develop it and get enough interest in one is a challenge. And at this point, live just has to get fixed. So, uh, you want to take us home?
Yeah, sure. So we hope you enjoyed. I think hopefully we're getting the podcast a little bit better. It should be out on various platforms, so you can check this out. In the description, I have some. I don't know if I have all of them, but also, there are the links to the resources that we mentioned.
Yep.
In this video should be down below in the description. But I hope you all enjoyed. I've been 10 Types, joined by Uncommon Fossil, and we're excited for you to listen to the next podcast. See ya.
Take care.